Even if something is seen as factual today, Nintendo at the end of the day could wake up tomorrow, decide they don't like the way things are with the Kong family tree, and decide to change every single bit of it to fit the way they want. So, yeah, about that. When I said Nintendo could rewrite Donkey Kong's history, I didn't think they'd actually do it, but sure enough, this little 13-year-old girl right here has major implications on the history of one of Nintendo's pillar characters, no matter what your stance on it is. We're now a few months removed from Donkey Kong Bananza, and I can safely say it's one of my favorite Nintendo games of all time, but that's not what we're here for. We're here because of how this girl, Pauline, young Pauline, Smalline, whatever you feel like calling her, has managed to spark conversations about how Nintendo handles its own legacy and the beloved characters behind it. What's the big deal, you ask? How could Pauline, Nintendo's original damsel in distress, be a child here if this is our Donkey Kong, the grandson of Cranky, the original arcade Donkey Kong? And everyone's best guesses have been all over the place, to say the least. And it's not hard to see why. Developers dodging questions, an unprovoked age confirmation out of the blue, dialogue that completely changes depending on what language you play in, all because of your singing sidekick in the silly little monkey game. And it has driven me nuts! I have spent an embarrassing amount of time and turned over an embarrassing amount of stones trying to figure out what is going on with Donkey Kong Bananza, and it has been an absolute roller coaster. But as it turns out, there is so much evidence about what's going on here, and yet, I don't think I've seen anyone online put all the pieces together and present the most likely solution. So I'm doing it myself. We're talking everything from decade-old trailers, promotional material from consoles ago, actual real-life roller coasters, history pages from Nintendo themselves, and if my hunch is right, even a project that Nintendo is working on right now that no one else is talking about. So buckle up, because we're going full speed as we take a look at everything Bananza is telling you and how it has turned the entire history of Donkey Kong into a paradox. Because no matter what your personal conclusion is, Donkey Kong Bananza just rewrote 40 years of Nintendo history. Alright, before we get started, I do want to let you know that this is essentially a follow-up video to my Donkey Kong Jr. video. If you've seen that one, you're caught up. If not, don't worry, this story stands on its own. But the basics of Donkey Kong's family history are covered there, explaining how they've led to DK Jr. being missing for 25 years. Also, it should go without saying, but there are Donkey Kong Bananza spoilers scattered throughout this video. But let's not keep you waiting, because we have a ton to get through. Let's get right to the heart of this issue with Bananza's lovable sidekick, Pauline. It all started when Nintendo's Korean website leaked this photo weeks in advance. Looking back, it's hilarious to see some of the mental gymnastics people were doing to try to tell us that this definitely isn't Pauline, or that Nintendo would never do this without giving us a great, ironclad explanation for it. Look at her bracelet and scrunchie, it's clearly just a form for Oddrock. This isn't Pauline unless time travel is involved in the storyline, guys. People, she's clearly just Pauline's kid. This is going the family tree route to compare to DK and Cranky. Oh wait, people still think that last one. Don't worry, we'll get there later on. Once she was announced to just be Pauline, Nintendo's Japanese website specified, out of nowhere, that Pauline is a 13-year-old girl who loves to sing. For Nintendo of all companies to do this is incredibly strange. Why'd they specify ahead of time that Pauline is 13? Mario's made Nintendo billions of dollars for almost half a century, and they've never officially told us his age once. IGN asked Bananza's developers about this, and in their answer, they say they wanted to use a familiar character, but present her in a different way. This right here is seemingly our first big hint about who Pauline is. The developers specifically say this is just a new appearance for Pauline, aka, this is the Pauline we already know. Meaning, she's either Nintendo's first Benjamin Button situation, or everything we thought we knew about Donkey Kong history no longer makes sense. For the first time in my life, I tried poking around to some communities that specialize in Nintendo lore. Big mistake, by the way. And it basically just looked like this every time young Pauline was brought up. Basically, there are three big ways you can look at it. Three different theories. Each of the three has their perks, each of the three has their downsides. For the first big theory, you just have to look in wiser, older, more cynical places. Because it turns out, the key to this whole thing may just be in our favorite Kong oracle, Cranky Kong. While we were sitting here wondering if the entire Donkey Kong story has been erased, Cranky was very quick to let us know exactly how he felt about any potential retcons. Cranky shows up in every layer and says the exact same thing every time, except for one unique line of dialogue in each layer, and he makes the most of that one line. In our very first underground section of the game, Cranky reminds us about his days where he had a charismatic rival in overalls, and just like that, the story of Cranky being the original Donkey Kong is restored in the middle of all the Pauline confusion. This guy has to be the one who had some random beef with the bug guy. But if you believe this to be what's happening, there is only one conclusion you can come to. These two have to be different people. But if you're asking me, there's just one big problem with both of the main theories floating around online. You have to play blindfolded to believe them. Listen, I get it. These are the theories that, to a degree, keep things nice and tidy and keep the Donkey Kong family tree from collapsing in on itself, which is exactly what the most die-hard lore consumers out there want the most. But if you're actually looking at the real evidence here, what Nintendo said, what they didn't say, what's in the game, what's not in the game, there is a mountain of evidence that goes against it and supports my take on it. So I hope you will at least listen to my take with an open mind. Theory number 3, and my personal stance on it, is that Pauline's appearance in Bananza has killed the old lore that Cranky is the arcade Donkey Kong, and I can prove it. There is a very simple basis to my stance. If this and this are the same person, then this can't be Cranky Kong. Fair warning, a lot of the rest of this video is just a whirlwind of evidence dumping on repeat. I'm fully aware that I sound like this a lot of the time here, and that none of this really matters. With that in mind, here's why I believe these three are all the same person, and what it means for the Donkey Kong family history. Let's get a big one out of the way here first. Mayor Pauline from Odyssey is the damsel in distress from the arcade game. I don't even know why this has become a hot take. That's her entire point of being in Odyssey. I'm so tired of people being like, what about Lady? What if she's Lady? OMG, Lady, 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 Lady. Oh my goodness, people. That was never even meant to be her name. When the arcade game launched, her being called Lady was being used as the Lady or a lady. To avoid calling her Pauline 44 years after the fact is either a misunderstanding of what's happened since, or a blatant attempt to make the puzzle fit together the way you want it to. Starting in 1982, tons of merchandise for the game came out and always called her Pauline. Obviously, she looks a lot different than the Pauline we know. But if you're not going to complain about this for Peach or Zelda, don't complain about it for Pauline. In the arcade port, Pauline and Mario. The TV show, Pauline and Mario. Coloring books, Pauline and Mario. NES pinball? Well, the manual just says the Fallen Maiden or the Lady. Not capitalized, by the way. But Nintendo themselves, Pauline, the damsel in distress from Donkey Kong. Also, she has brown hair here for the first time already. Lady does not exist on her own. Lady was a placeholder from before she had a name. It's not incorrect when Smash Bros. Shows art from the arcade cabinet and says it features Donkey Kong and Lady. But it is incorrect when you say Lady isn't Pauline, because they've always been treated as one and the same. Pauline got her modern design in DK94, a game that is literally just a retelling of the arcade title that spins it into a full-blown game. She's in the Mario vs. DK games with this design because of her arcade roots, and her role in Odyssey exists as yet another nod to these arcade roots. If you need more proof this is her, just in Odyssey alone we have her saying she was kidnapped by an ape. And before you say, well, Void Kong kidnapped Pauline, maybe she means that. Void Kong is not an ape, neither is Poppy Kong. Well, what about Grumpy Kong? He was there too and he's an ape. Fine. The original Japanese text says gorilla. Grumpy Kong is not a gorilla, and she's obviously referencing the arcade game here anyways, people. Don't try to do this. Then a parasol, hat, and purse are scattered across New Donk, just like they were in the arcade game. And when you bring the purse to her, she says she lost hers that terrible day in reference to the arcade game. Her specific little dance she performs is based off her movement in the arcade game. If this, and the entire theming of the area being because of her role there, aren't enough, as you play the festival you see these two posters. one of which just says Pauline with her picture. When you play the 8-bit version of this festival, you can see her arcade sprite saying not Lady, but Pauline. Not to mention, Odyssey's team is who made Bananza. What's the argument here? That they're retconning a significant part of their own recent game with a nameless, faceless grandmother? Not happening. These two are the same. To me, that feels obvious, but that has been widely debated because of her. So, if these two are the same, how do we know Pauline is the same? Well, the easiest part is focusing on showing that she's just Mayor Pauline from Odyssey as a kid. Besides the obvious that these two are both named Pauline and look the same, we get Pauline's Odyssey dress as an outfit in the game. The difference between this outfit and every other outfit, besides the fact that she wears shoes, is that this is the only outfit we see Pauline wear on her own accord besides her base attire, where she's performing at City Hall just like she does in Odyssey. She also, despite just being a little kid, does her little dance, referencing the arcade title, and has other little mannerisms Pauline has in Odyssey. Her whole thing is that she wants to become a singer. Adult Pauline is a singer. She seems to have a weird fixation on New Donk City Hall, as it gets brought up multiple times. Adult Pauline is mayor and works at City Hall. In the Ask the Developers interview for Bananza, they specifically say Pauline got suggested to be in the game once they thought of a music motif, i.e., she's a musical character already and we're making the game focus on music. Let's get her in here. Worth noting that they have a picture of young Pauline here with a description of her as a character in Super Mario and Donkey Kong games, specifically Odyssey and Bananza. Besides all this, Pauline also has a character profile on a Nintendo website that has not been updated for Bananza. But, interestingly, it does have Donkey Kong as the next related character after Cappy and Mario. While not updated, it does feature updates for Bananza alongside Mario Kart World and other spin-offs Pauline has been in. No one else has Bananza in their updates besides her and DK. Also, she literally writes the Donkey Kong theme song at the end of Bananza. Are we just going to ignore that?
Look at us, so big and small, two together through it all. Heart of gold, a wish come true. You and me, unbreakable.
And then in the post-game, you can hear her come up with the beat from 25 meters, the first level from the Donkey Kong arcade game, which, of course, can also be heard in the background of Jump Up Superstar.
Oh, that's the melody.
You may literally be seeing little Pauline here coming up with the songs from her two biggest appearances. Come on, people! I feel like I'm losing my mind a little bit here, because the average person does know that this little Pauline here is the same person as Mayor Pauline from Odyssey. To those people, thank you for being normal. Most people either separate Lady from Pauline because it's obvious young Pauline is Mayor Pauline, or they say Bananza's Pauline is a new character, because it's obvious Pauline is from the arcade Donkey Kong. Why is it such a bad thing for these three to all be the same? Which is what every sign points to. Oh, that's right. The Cranky Kong thing. Most people are picking one of these obviously flawed stances because if they don't, it means backing off the idea that Cranky was the original arcade Donkey Kong. Well, like I said in the DK Jr. video, I think there's a notable lack of evidence that Nintendo views Cranky as the original DK. I know Rare certainly viewed it as the case when they were making the Donkey Kong games, but like I said before, it is never stated in a video game, only a manual. There are multiple on Nintendo manuals with lore that makes no sense or has been outright retconned. And Rare themselves knew this was controversial and admitted to downplaying it to Nintendo per Greg Mayles himself, who also admitted they, quote, didn't give much thought to the Cranky thing. Why do we act like this is forever etched into Nintendo history as though Miyamoto found it on top of Mount Zion? In case I'm not being clear here, the reason you're all confused about Pauline is because you're insistent that Nintendo has kept this Cranky lore. I don't think they have, and here's why. They have continuously tied the arcade title to this Donkey Kong. I find it to be a fundamental misunderstanding of how Nintendo operates when people say the Cranky lore is upheld, but only quietly and behind the scenes. Or when people imply Nintendo is hiding answers in a nameless, off-screen grandmother. They love their legacy characters, they love making callbacks, and they love reminding you of their characters' histories in their branding, as they do with Donkey Kong all the time. Being that it's one of the most important games in Nintendo history, Nintendo calls back to the arcade title all the time. So why then, if Cranky is in every Donkey Kong game, is he never associated with any of these callbacks? There are genuinely 2 times that I can find where Nintendo themselves, not an outside company, has tied the arcade game to Cranky. That's it. 2. In February 2000, Nintendo Online Magazine posted an article explaining it all for us, stating that Cranky is the original, DK Jr. is his son, and that modern DK is Cranky's grandson. Though, it does not say that DK Jr. is DK's dad. Bad news for anyone who swears modern DK is a grown-up DK Jr., right? Yes and no. There is a page for DKC's GBA port published by Nintendo of Europe that takes its own liberties on the family tree, saying modern DK is a grown-up DK Jr. These 2 instances, the only 2 I could find of Nintendo using the Cranky lore, can't even both be true, because they directly clash with each other. Though, I do think it's worth mentioning that we know that back in 2003 when this was written, Nintendo of Europe would have been writing this on their own without oversight from Nintendo of Japan, as evidenced by the blurb saying the description was provided by the publisher, Nintendo of Europe. Nuance like this is how you see other companies make nods to this as well that clashes with what Nintendo says today. Mario Superstar Baseball, Bandai Namco, and filled with other errors or retconned lore. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, lines written and localized by Kojima Productions and Konami, then handed back over. So then, what does Nintendo say that clashes with this? Well, Nintendo themselves, across the board in every region, has been consistent about ignoring the old Cranky lore for over 2 decades. Going back to 2004, Mario vs. Donkey Kong was released for the Game Boy Advance, with box art that says, for the first time in ages, Mario faces off against his original foe. On top of that, Nintendo Power ran an ad for it saying, gaming's original rivalry reignites, while adding, it's been a long time since Donkey Kong was a villain, and that since the original arcade game, he has been the protagonist of a number of Nintendo titles. If this is your style of proof, by the way, stick around, because I have a bunch of other examples just like this one. But for now, what about those Bananza quotes? The overalls, the girders, the smoking gun that shows Nintendo is still abiding by the lore that Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. Here's the thing about those. I was getting the vibe that I'm telling you about now. Pauline is obviously the same Pauline, which means the Cranky thing has to have been retconned. So why are these lines in the game? Well, this game was of course first written in Japanese and then translated into English. When you look at the Japanese text, it makes everything a lot more simple. Those references are in the English translation, but have nothing even remotely similar in the original text. So I have no idea why Nintendo of America added these in there. There's no dialogue of this nature from Cranky in the original version. I went ahead and checked the Spanish version as well, and the overalls that everyone's freaking out about aren't there either, which is notable since the Spanish version gets translated from English, not Japanese. The best you're getting that you could say is a nod to Cranky is the 8-bit DK fossil, which in its original Japanese version says a certain Kong in his younger days, mentioning that barrel rolling has been passed down to his descendants. This is all great, but even the devs said don't overthink them, and that they exist to be reminiscent of other games. Stay focused with me and you will know exactly who that certain Kong is referring to. But let's face it, there's effectively nothing from Nintendo tying Cranky to this game in decades. Even when he was playable in Tropical Freeze, they made no mention of it. Shouldn't that have been a huge deal? For the first time ever, Nintendo's original mascot is playable in a mainline game. Well, no, it wasn't a big deal, because that's not what was happening. Meanwhile, this guy has a ton of references even outside of the original Mario vs. DK, tying him to that fateful game. Focusing just on Bananza alone for a second, the game in its entirety is paying homage to the arcade title everywhere you look. The developers said the cyan and magenta color scheme that pops up everywhere is an homage to the girders and ladders from back in 1981. Every time you use sonar, every time you switch layers, every time something pops up nearby, the barrels, the ropes. This is spread throughout Bananza so much that I can't even begin to list everywhere it is, and it's all a tie to the arcade game. The first appearance for Donkey Kong and Pauline. When DK is full of Banergy, people notice he gets a bit of a glow to him. He only has this glowing difference when he's accompanied by Pauline. If you're split up from her, you lose your glow entirely. DK's normal fur color, if he's with Pauline, has an orangish tint to it that looks a lot like his original arcade sprite. You know, when he was with Pauline. I guess he was full of Banergy then too. Before we move off Bananza for a bit, Pauline's default shirt is an homage to her original arcade artwork. You'd think she went through a blender, but we see on the end screen and when she shows back up in the post game that she just chooses to wear these clothes looking like this. Go back and look at some posts from when she first leaked. Everyone swore up and down that her tattered clothes were going to give us a crucial storyline explanation. Nope, she just dresses like that, though they did squeeze that one Easter egg in there for us. If you're a diehard on the other side of the debate from me on this, give me one good reason to put all of these Easter eggs in this game for characters that they're not even really applicable to, in your opinion. Going back to Bananza's developers one more time, not only does the article tie Pauline to being the Pauline we've always known, but for DK, they mention Donkey Kong began life in the arcades as Mario's nemesis. But since then, he's had many guises, be that a cool, rugged king of the jungle, or a lovable goofball. If it sounds like there's some potentially ambiguous fluff in there, it's because Nintendo of America put it in there again, by the way. The original Japanese response just says, when he first appeared in the arcade game, he started out as Mario's enemy. But depending on the game you play, he can be a cool and wild king of the jungle, or a humorous and beloved character. And he has many different sides to him. Before anyone says otherwise, this is not the same thing as saying Donkey Kong as a series started out in the arcades, which they do say elsewhere. There's no gray area here. When he started out in the arcades, he was Mario's enemy, but he has also been a king of the jungle or a goofball. There are also dozens of times where Nintendo outright looks at modern DK and says, yep, that was him in the arcade title. Something Nintendo does not do with Cranky even when he's right there. His Play Nintendo profile says Donkey Kong has changed a lot since he got a game named after him way back when. He has a nice family and wears a tie, but he still likes to crash through branches and boxes in the jungle. The change, of course, is that he's no longer a villain like he was back in his debut. Cranky's has nothing of the sort. On another page showing Donkey Kong throughout the years, complete with this very cool graphic, Nintendo says almost the exact same thing, but then they add fun facts about how he debuted with Mario, who was once called Jumpman, and how he hasn't always worn his tie. You put the Jumpman thing in there and mention DK94. Wouldn't this have been an easy and obvious place to mention the Cranky thing? It's a literal history page, and Nintendo says this is this ape's history. Donkey Kong shows up in the crowd and as a secret fighter in Punch-Out for the Wii because he famously cameoed in the crowd of the arcade Punch-Out back in 1984. On Nintendo's listing for the Virtual Console Donkey Kong arcade game, they mention how this is Mario's debut game, and how this game launched the career of the eponymous ape who went on to be a hero himself. I don't know guys, they might just be talking about Cranky Kong and Tropical Freeze. Nintendo's Japanese website also has a Donkey Kong history page of its own. In the section for the arcade game it says, since Donkey Kong, Mario, parentheses, Jumpman, and Donkey Kong have appeared together in various games, sometimes cooperating and sometimes opposing each other. Well, we all know Cranky and Mario have never been in the same game. Then further down it mentions the first Donkey Kong Country as Diddy Kong's debut, but makes no mention about, according to the Cranky lore, that this was the debut of the new Donkey Kong character as well. Then there's my new personal favorite, this video from Nintendo highlighting Donkey Kong and Mario's rivalry over the years and whether they're friends, enemies, or frenemies. Among the games they list where these two have appeared together is the NES port of the arcade Donkey Kong. There are also so many recent arcade Easter eggs that could have easily been attributed to Cranky if they wanted, but were instead used with our modern Donkey Kong. In Duck Hunt's Smash reveal trailer, we see 8-bit DK transform into modern DK alongside all sorts of famous Nintendo characters. In Mario Maker, DK's amiibo costume plays sounds from the arcade game. Sure, it's all 8-bit as it is, but Diddy Kong's plays DKC sound effects from a totally different generation, which they could have easily done for DK2 if that was his first ever game. In that new Donkey Kong section of Universal's theme park, they of course had to make a reference to DK's beginnings. So you can see a hieroglyph of DK standing atop the first level of Donkey Kong. There's no 8-bit action here, but his signature hairdo is a dead giveaway about who this is. In DKC Returns, there's a level with a sweet 8-bit DK in the back here, complete with his signature red tie. A nice update, similar to how 8-bit Mario is usually shown with his modern colors instead of his period accurate ones. In Mario Kart World, each of the first few cups have a character you unlock by completing the cup. The cool part about it is that each of the unlockable characters has a track themed after them in these cups. DK's themed track, DK Spaceport, is a gigantic version of the iconic 25-meter Donkey Kong level, complete with a giant robot DK throwing barrels at you to top it all off. Once again, we have the hairdo and the tie to tie this into our beloved ape. They also share one of the exact same animations. If it wasn't him back in 1981, they didn't have to do that. Also, in the Mario movie, which, yes, it does of course divert from the traditional video game stories we know in many ways, DK and Mario have all sorts of arcade nods visually and through their sound effects, all while Cranky's there and has nothing of the sort. Also, we know DK and Mario were babies at the same time, and that they were the star children, aka the important people. One of the stupidest arguments used to talk about Cranky Kong is, well, gorillas age faster than humans. That's why he's old and Mario's not. Yeah, great. By that logic, wouldn't DK be mega old by now since he was a baby at the same time as Mario? And wouldn't Cranky have joined Wrinkly, if you know what I mean? Also, I cannot help but love the irony of this point being used for years as a bad faith talking point, only for, of all things, Pauline's age in Bananza to throw a wrench in it. I could not have written that better myself. I know I'm rambling at this point, but I'm trying to drive the point home. It has been said far too often that Nintendo upholds this old lore. Sometimes it's been treated as though Nintendo lives and dies by it. That could not be further from the truth. I'm sure someone watching this is ready to point out issues with some of what I've presented today. See here, they have 8-bit Link turn into Twilight Princess Link, but technically, they're not the same. Ugh, my bad. You're right. Link getting reincarnated over and over as Link is totally the same thing as Donkey Kong. Even if you take issue with one or two of these points, is there really a way you can overlook all of them? We're over 20 years from the last time Nintendo said Cranky was the arcade Donkey Kong, and they've never even as much as put him in a game with Mario. This theory keeps everything nice and neat. One DK, one Pauline, one Mario, just the way it should be. If you want to get all technical and ask why DK would go on to villainously kidnap Pauline in the events of the arcade game, well, I can't tell you for certain. But do consider we have seen DK kidnap Pauline, only for it to be done under completely friendly or harmless circumstances, with Pauline herself even being in on the kidnapping one time. Besides, according to his creator himself, DK's goal in 1981 was only to get a rise out of Mario, never to harm Pauline. And it was with this in mind that Nintendo does not have you murk DK at the end of the game, only foil his plans. Seems like a perfectly plausible explanation for me of how that could all happen after Bananza, as if that's how Nintendo games work anyways. Does this really matter at all? Of course not. Have I given this way too much effort? Yes, my wife is this close to leaving me if she ever has to hear me talk about it anymore. But please, stop trying to attach a character to this incredibly important game who has nothing to do with it. I will leave you with one final point, then the rest is up to you. We are 6 years away from 2031, the 50th anniversary of the Donkey Kong arcade game, the game that made Nintendo who we know them to be today. We have had heavy use of references to this game in the last two major releases from Nintendo EPD, Super Mario Odyssey and Donkey Kong Bananza. I have to imagine they're cooking something up for this, and I would not at all be surprised if it was a full-blown game starring Nintendo's three original characters, Mario, DK, and Pauline. Whether they retell the events from 1981 again with a modern look, whether they go to the DK94 route with it, who knows? I just hope we have something in the works to pay homage to this milestone arcade game. If you're still doubting me, then answer this question. If a game like that were to come out, complete with trailers, Nintendo Directs, sections of the website dedicated to this anniversary, is there any doubt who would star in it? It certainly would not be that grumpy old ape with a cane, not an unnamed woman, or someone's off-screen grandmother. Then, look on the bright side. If we were to 100% without a reasonable doubt confirm that Nintendo has erased Cranky's lore and embraced Donkey Kong's arcade roots, that means we could one day see the whole reason I jumped down this rabbit hole in the first place, the return of my boy, Donkey Kong Jr. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing and like the video if you enjoyed it. I promise I won't sound as deranged in the next one. But for now, one more time, I'll leave you with this. Bring back Donkey Kong Jr.